Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're tackling a question that I know a lot of you have been wondering about.
Okay.
Should you speak a new language right from day one or hold back?
Oh, yeah.
It's a debate I see all the time in the
Right.
language learning world.
Mhm.
And there's some pretty strong opinions on both sides, so
Yeah.
we're going to break it all down for you today.
Awesome.
So let's just imagine for a second you're starting to learn a brand new language.
Okay.
Maybe you're even traveling to a country where that language is spoken.
Yeah.
Do you force yourself to speak right away?
Yeah.
Even if you feel totally awkward and uncomfortable?
Hmm.
Or do you kind of wait until you feel
Right.
a bit more confident
Right.
in your abilities?
I think a lot of people do that.
Yeah, for
Kind
sure.
of hold back and
Yeah,
just absorb and listen
right.
before they start speaking.
I mean, it makes sense. Like
Right.
you don't want to put yourself out there and sound like a total fool.
Totally.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I think there are like pros and cons to both sides.
exactly. And that's what we're going to explore today. Is speaking from day one the golden rule of language learning? Or is it just a rusty myth?
Ooh, I like that rusty myth.
So let's jump right in and start with the case for speaking right away.
Okay. Sounds good.
One of the biggest arguments you hear for this side is that it builds your confidence early on.
Mm.
Like you're tackling that fear head on.
Yeah. Just dive right in.
Yes, it's like ripping off the Band-Aid.
Right.
And, once you get over that initial hurdle, it can actually be really empowering.
Absolutely. And I think that empowerment leads to like more motivation.
Right.
You feel good about it, so you keep doing it.
Yeah, exactly. Like a positive feedback loop.
Exactly.
So have you ever experienced that kind of confidence boost from
Uh,
speaking early on?
oh, yeah, definitely. Like, I remember when I first started learning Spanish, I was so nervous to speak. But I forced myself to just like start talking to people, even if it was just like basic phrases. And you know what? After a while, I started to feel more comfortable, more confident, and I actually started to enjoy it.
I can totally see that. And I think it also makes sense from a learning perspective, right? Like
Mhm.
when you're actively using the language, you're strengthening those neural
Oh,
pathways.
for sure. It's like anything you learn, right? The more you practice, the better you get.
Exactly. And it's not just about memorizing words and grammar rules, it's about actually putting them into practice.
Yeah, like you can read all the textbooks you want, but until you actually start speaking and using the language in real life situations, you're not really going to internalize it.
Yeah, like the difference between reading about how to ride a bike and actually getting on one.
Exactly. You're going to fall a few times, but you'll learn a lot faster by doing.
Okay, so that all sounds pretty convincing. But what about the other side of the argument? The case against speaking from day one.
Yeah, that's important too.
I mean, what one concern you hear a lot is that it can lead to fossilized errors.
Oh, right. Those mistakes that just,
Yeah, become ingrained.
yeah, like you learn something wrong early on,
Mm.
and then it's super hard to break that habit. Exactly. And I've seen that happen a lot with pronunciation. People learn a word or a sound wrong in the beginning, and then it's like stuck in their brain.
Oh yeah, I've definitely been there. It can be so frustrating.
It is, and it can be really hard to unlearn those things.
Right, so how do we avoid that? Like,
Yeah.
is it really just a matter of waiting longer to speak?
Well, I think it's more nuanced than that. It's not necessarily about when you start speaking, but how you approach it.
Okay, that makes sense.
Like if you're just blindly speaking without any focus on accuracy or getting feedback, then yeah, you're more likely to develop bad habits.
So active listening and getting feedback are crucial.
Absolutely. Like listening is the foundation of language learning. You need to hear the sounds, the rhythms, the intonation patterns before you can accurately reproduce them yourself.
Right, it's like trying to sing a song without ever hearing the melody first.
Exactly. And getting feedback from native speakers or teachers is so important for identifying and correcting those fossilized errors.
Okay, so it seems like there's a balance to be struck here. Like you don't want to be too afraid to speak, but you also don't want to just be carelessly making mistakes.
Right. And I think it's important to remember that everyone learns differently.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Some people are naturally more extroverted and comfortable with taking risks, while others prefer a more structured and reflective approach.
So it's really about finding what works best for you.
Exactly. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to language learning.
So for our listeners out there who are maybe feeling a bit overwhelmed by all of this, what would you say is the most important thing to keep in mind?
I would say be honest with yourself about your learning style and your comfort level. If the thought of speaking right away fills you with dread, then don't force it. You can still make amazing progress by focusing on listening, comprehension, vocabulary building, and gradually working your way up to speaking.
And if you're the type of person who's like Ready to jump in and start chatting? Then go for it.
Yeah, just be mindful of those potential pitfalls we talked about. Get feedback, listen actively, and don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Because mistakes are inevitable.
Oh, absolutely. They're how we learn. It's about embracing those mistakes, learning from them, and using them as stepping stones on your language journey.
So maybe the real key isn't when you start speaking, but how you approach it.
I love that, like with confidence, curiosity, and a willingness to experiment.
The exact.
That's going to make the whole experience so much more enjoyable and ultimately more successful.
Couldn't have said it better myself. All right, everyone. That's all we have time for on this deep dive. But we want to hear from you. What's your approach to speaking in a new language? Do you dive right in, or do you prefer to wait a bit? Let us know in the comments below. And until next time, keep exploring and happy learning.